Hello everyone, a very good evening. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 28th April 2025 and today we have some very important and very interesting news articles from different newspapers. So we will discuss all these important articles in a very detailed manner, linking them with your syllabus. And the first topic with which we are going to start this discussion is about the political trilemma that has been existed in Europe, that is existing in Europe, and the crisis in the West. And we will understand the interplay between the globalization, democracy, and the sovereignty of the states in the West, particularly Europe and the North America. So the context is that recent global trends have been highlighting the relevance of a particular work. So that is Donny Roderick's political trilemma. So this political trilemma has been written by Danny Rodrigues. And in fact, so the Western democracies right now have been facing this political trilemma. So what is a political trilemma? So this is a trilemma between the globalization, democracy, and the sovereignty. And this political trilemma is reflected in the West in the form of increasing polarization, growing mistrust, and also rising populism in the West. So this is what is called as trilemma. So trilemma is essentially the growing trilemma between the globalization, sovereignty, and the democracy. In fact, if we delve deep into the Roderick's political trilemma work, so in fact Danny Rodrigues in 2000 he published a paper, right? So the name of the paper is How Far Will International Economic Integration Go? So that is the name of the paper that was published by Danny Rodrigues 2000. And in fact, this particular paper has proposed that countries can actually achieve only 2 out of these 3 goals. What are the 3 goals? Democracy, sovereignty, and also the globalization. So these are the 3 goals of the countries. But Danny Rodrigues' paper has been telling us that any country can achieve only 2 out of 3 goals. A deep globalization, national sovereignty, and the mass democracy. So these are 3 goals of a country. However, any country can achieve only 2 of these 3 goals. And in fact, he also held that any country cannot achieve all these 3 goals simultaneously. I hope it is clear for you. And in fact, we have been experiencing a widespread globalization after 1990s. So after the fall of Soviet Union, we have seen the widespread influence of globalization all across the world. And in fact, globalization has been described as a borderless village, and a borderless world and a global village, right? So it has been described as global village or a borderless world. So what is the key characteristic feature of globalization? So the key characteristic feature of the globalization is the free movement of goods and services without any interruptions. So free movement of goods and services, investment, so everything comes part of the globalization. But now around the world, you could see the anti-globalization trend has been emerging, and it has also gaining a lot of attention. So this anti-globalization trend is called as protectionism. So protectionism is also known as the anti-globalization trend. The best example of the anti-globalization trend or protectionism is the election of Donald Trump as US president, election of Donald Trump as a US president. And Donald Trump also won elections in US with his very popular and a famous theme, America First. America First. So America First, it is very closely it is actually in line with the deglobalization or protectionism. So this is what Danny Rodriguez has been telling us. So we have seen from 1990s there was a widespread globalization, and in fact, so India also opened up its economy as part of this globalization, and we call it as LPG reforms. So the LPG reforms were also part of the larger globalization or widespread globalization that we have been experiencing throughout the world. However, the real international economic integration, so despite such a huge, a large scale globalization, world or real international economic integration remain restricted. So it has remained restricted because of some reasons, such as the national barriers. National barriers are still existing. For example, there are tariff barriers for trade, and also the non-tariff barriers as well. So when we talk about the non-tariff barriers, there are sanitary and phytosanitary measures, sanitary and phytosanitary measures that the developed countries very often impose on the goods from the developing countries. So what are the sanitary and phytosanitary measures? So they deny the products based on the quality. So they complain that the goods are poor quality, and because of that reason they would deny the entry of goods into their economies or their markets. So this is a non-tariff barrier example. However, tariff barriers are also there, and you could also see tariffs and counter tariffs and even reciprocal tariffs all across the world, despite WTO as a global trade body is existing, right? So it proves that despite a widespread globalization all across the world, but the real international economic integration remain restricted because of the national barriers that are imposed by different countries, and the high transaction costs, and even the protectionist policies as well. So when I say protectionist policies, America First, America First, and the carbon border adjustment mechanism of European Union. So all these different policies comes under part of the protectionist policy. So they wanted to protect their domestic industries from the influence of the global markets. And in fact, all these countries in the West once heavily benefited from the globalization, now they are strongly opposing the globalization. However, initially Danny Rodriguez's work is considered as a, it is just an academic work. It has no real political or economic relevance at that point of time, because it was published way back in the year 2000. So therefore it was believed that it is just an academic work and it has no political or economic relevance. However, now Danny Rodriguez framework is manifesting in real political and economic crisis. So it is being manifested in Western Europe. So you could clearly see Danny Rodriguez framework manifesting in the Western Europe, because it will be very difficult for the Western Europe to balance all these three different goals, right? So Danny Rodriguez clearly held that balancing globalization, sovereignty and democracy is unachievable. And you could see this is what has been happening in the West, because the Western countries are facing a lot of difficulty balancing the globalization and democracy, and also the sovereignty of the state, right? So the three main choices of the trilemma and their manifestation. So we'll try to understand so how these three different things are being manifested in Europe. right? So firstly, we'll look into democracy and globalization excluding the sovereignty. For example, any state which prioritizes democracy, which prioritizes globalization, so that particular state must sacrifice sovereignty, because all three goals are not achievable, right? In fact, European Union is the best example of democracy and globalization. So this is the best example of balancing both democracy and globalization. And European Union and number of countries which are part of the European Union, they have sacrificed their sovereignty. And in fact, it has led to economic success of most of the European countries, because they have the common currency and visa free regime. So therefore it has led to the economic success of European Union, but it has resulted in the nationalist resentment in most of the European Union countries. And that is clearly visible in the Brexit. So Brexit was Britain wanted to come out of the European Union. The exit of Britain from the European Union is what is called as Brexit, and Brexit was the result of the nationalist resentment that has been developed within the European Union, because Britain felt that it has its sovereignty has been taken away, its sovereignty has been compromised, and because of that reason Britain decided to exit out of the European Union. And apart from that, within Europe, because number of countries have sacrificed their sovereignty when they become part of the European Union, in each of these countries there is a growth of, or a growing right, far right politics or political parties or the leaders. And these far right political leaders are emphasizing on nationalism, and they are also emphasizing on the greater sovereignty, because by prioritizing democracy and globalization they have already sacrificed the sovereignty. And when they sacrificed sovereignty, it has resulted in the rise of far right political parties and leaders in Europe. And at the same time, there is also increasing demand from the European Union member countries for the greater sovereignty as well. Secondly, the second case is, if any country which prioritizes globalization and sovereignty, so it must sacrifice democracy, right? So for example, imagine there is a country which has been prioritizing globalization along with the sovereignty. So it wanted to have the sovereignty, and it also wanted to have a globalization. It wanted to respect the principles of globalization. Then it must sacrifice democracy, because countries which restrict the popular political influence by empowering the technocratic institutions. So what they do, they empower the technocratic institutions instead of lending credence to the popular political opinions or popular public opinions. For example, when we talk about the technocratic institutions like independent central banks, and even examples like International Monetary Fund driven fiscal measures in African countries like Kenya that have compromised the public welfare. And in fact, the compromising democracy actually means that a democracy will not exist. Even if democracy exists, a democracy which a nascent form of democracy will exist in those countries which prioritizes globalization and the sovereignty. Very often the rights of the people are curtailed in those states. So elections will not take place in a free and fair manner. Institutions are controlled by the governments. Institutions are also controlled by a few individuals. So this is the second case scenario. And the third scenario is countries which may prioritize democracy and sovereignty, but they limit the globalization. or they have to sacrifice the globalization. For example, if a country, imagine that India has been demanding more sovereignty, more control over the FDIs, more control over the FDIs, more control over the corporate, and more control over the multinational companies, then it essentially means that when India as a state is having more, demanding more sovereignty by controlling all these different entities, so it's certainly antithetical to the globalization. So it would be certainly antithetical to globalization. So India has been prioritizing democracy plus sovereignty. Not just India, most of the countries in East Asia and Southeast Asia, they are prioritizing democracy and the sovereignty and limiting globalization, right? So they have prioritized their domestic policies. They have prioritized the sentiments of the public over the globalization. So thereby it had fostered a high growth, but often at the cost of this in the political West, right? So globalization has led to reducing the levels of poverty alleviation, improving the standards of people, for example, education, healthcare, right? So globalization helped in improving the living standards of the people, but globalization has led to wiping out manufacturing jobs in most of the developed countries. So thereby globalization has actually created a disenchantment among the left, disenchantment among the people. So that is why there is a growth of far right political parties in these developed countries, and even there is a substantial growth of leaders who are emphasizing on protectionism, who are emphasizing on deglobalization, right? So Donald Trump is an example of that, and even you could see that Donald Trump very often emphasizing on manufacturing within US, and rise of populism and the insular policies as well, because leaders like Donald Trump, Geert Wilders and Viktor Orban, so they actually leveraged these grievances which are existing, advocating protectionism, immigration control, and also retreat from the global commitments like climate action. So US President Donald Trump came out of the Paris climate deal saying that it is against the interests of the US, so therefore US will not be part of the Paris climate deal. And you could see that this is because of the existing disenchantment among the people of these countries in the West. However, so without carefully navigating the trade-off, the relations between the sovereignty, democracy, and globalization in these Western democracies, so there will always be risk of social unrest, institutional decay, and even worsening inequalities as well. So one thing that we should remember here is that it is true that globalization has led to declining level of poverty or alleviation of poverty, but globalization has led to a substantial increase in the inequalities all across the world. So inequalities may create large scale social unrest. It may result in large scale social unrest. So most of these Western countries are also experiencing the substantially higher levels of inequalities, firstly. Secondly, social unrest is not just because of the inequalities, because of the other problems also. The other problems including unemployment in these Western developed countries, higher levels of unemployment, higher levels of inflation in those respective countries, and even illegal immigration. So therefore all these factors have been resulted in the social unrest in Europe, right? So over a period of time, what happens is that it will produce more and more far right political parties and political leaders. far right political parties and the political leaders who excessively emphasize on the nationalism and national interest that may be antithetical to the present globalization trend, because they would very often advocate for the deglobalization and they would advocate protectionist policies. And in fact, once they benefited from these globalization or policies of globalization, but now most of the countries are ready to adopt these protectionist policies to protect their domestic industries, to prevent the social unrest that has been emerging in these European countries. So I hope you have understood this. And the next very important topic is United Nations Ocean Conference. So we'll try to understand how oceans are very, very important for us, and what are the threats that oceans have been facing, and how to protect and conserve the ocean resources which are very important for our survival, and what is UN's Ocean Conference and where it will be conducted, and what will be the expected outcomes of UN's Ocean Conference. We'll try to understand this. And firstly, we'll talk about the importance of oceans for India. So we all knew that Indian peninsula is surrounded by oceans on three sides. So we have Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean and the Bay of Bengal. So Indian peninsula is surrounded by the oceans on three sides, and in fact it is also said that so 1/3 of India's population has been dependent on the ocean resources. They are living in the coastal areas. They are directly or indirectly depending on the ocean resources as well. However, if we talk about India's coastline, it is 7,517 kilometers. So that is India's total coastline. And in fact, India is also among the countries whose daily life, economy, environment are most of the things which are directly dependent on the ocean resources. And in fact, the very same thing has been acknowledged by the Indian government's Vision 2030 action plan. So Indian government's Vision 2030 action plan recognizes the importance of blue economy. So in recent times, blue economy has also getting a lot of attention, and this is a very, very important term. So blue economy specifically deals with the resources that could be extracted from the oceans, whether it is fishery, mineral resources, power generation, trade and commerce, shipping, tourism, biodiversity. So everything is part of the blue economy, right? For a country with a huge coastline, and we around 1/3 of India's population are living in the coastal areas, and they are directly or indirectly getting their livelihood from these ocean resources. A blue economy for India is very important. Along with the blue economy, protection and conservation of ocean resources also very, very important to sustain a blue economy in India, and this has been emphasized by Government of India's Vision 2030. And this Vision 2030 of the Government of India recognizes the importance of blue economy as one of the 10 core dimensions of the India's economic growth and development. Now, so you could see here the importance of the oceans and the resources. So the ecological importance of the oceans, for example, so they do a lot of ecosystem functions, and in fact marine ecosystems themselves have their own food web and food chain, and in fact water quality preservation, biodiversity maintenance, stock improvement and stabilization of the shorelines, pollution reduction, and even CO2 removal from the atmosphere. So all these are the important ecological functions performed by the oceans. Now, what is the socio-economic importance of oceans? So they ensure food security, they also ensure economic security. So how they ensure food security? By providing us the fishery resources, and economic security by trade or seaborne trade and commerce, shipping, tourism, so all these different areas, they will ensure economic security, empowerment, because the coastal communities which primarily dependent on the ocean resources, their livelihoods and the living standards would be improved, and they would also be lift the poverty alleviation, right? Poverty alleviation is also another very important area, and cultural services, human health, knowledge transfer, capacity building. So these are the important importance of the oceans, right? So in fact, sustainable development goals, goal number 14 talks about the conservation and sustainable usage of oceans, seas, marine resources for sustainable development. So this is what the sustainable development goal number 14 talks about, right? So SDG goal number 14 talks about the life below water. Now in this context, we'll understand this in a much more detailed manner, what the author has been telling us. The ocean is a global common. So what is a global common? So it essentially means ocean belongs to every one of us. So ocean is not the property of one single country or one single community. So it is belonging to every one of us. And in fact, ocean also feeds, protects our people. Similarly, 1 in 3 people actually rely on ocean for their livelihood. So we have also discussed in India also, around 1/3 of India's population living in the coastal areas, and they also get their livelihood from the marine resources. However, this is an area, but still we don't know completely, right? So the ocean resources, oceans, we don't have the complete knowledge, and in fact this area also lacks the global governance framework or the architecture and funding which is necessary and important for the preservation of the marine environment. However, if we carefully look at the figures, the data with respect to the marine environment, so those figures are worrying. So worrying because more than 8 million tons of plastic end up in ocean every year, right? So plastic pollution is the major problem that has been affecting the marine organisms and marine ecosystems. And in fact, more than 1/3 of fish stock also suffer overfishing because there is a lack of global governance. There is a lack of proper framework and an architecture that could actually look into the unregulated overfishing. And because of that reason, 1/3 of fish stock in the world also suffer overfishing. And similarly, the other risks which are associated because of the climate change, the ocean acidification is another major problem, sea level rise because of melting glaciers, destruction of marine ecosystems. So all these different problems and challenges have been gaining pace, and these are majorly because of the climate change. So climate change is the key driving factor. Climate change is a key driver behind all these different problems, along with unsustainable human interventions. So unsustainable human intervention is also another major problem that we have been experiencing. However, so it is very important that we must act now. So we should not further delay it. So whether it is a plastic pollution, whether it is a overfishing, ocean acidification, melting glacier, rising sea levels, threatening the coastal communities. So it is very important that we should collectively come together and act against this trend. So in fact, we should also make sure that the multilateral collective action by all these different countries should be aligned with the challenges of the ocean protection. So there are certain challenges when we talk about the ocean protection, and we should primarily focus on those challenges. So this is what the author has been emphasizing here. However, from June 9 to 13, France will actually co-host the third UN Ocean Conference. So this is UN Ocean Conference, and this will be the third UN Ocean Conference, and France will co-host the third UN Ocean Conference with Costa Rica at a place called Nice. So at a place called Nice in Costa Rica, and France will co-host United Nations Ocean Conference, and this will be the third Ocean Conference. And in this conference, it is generally expected that there will be a multi-stakeholder participation, because 100 heads of states, governments, tens and thousands of researchers, scientists, economic actors, activists, and citizens from different parts of the world will participate in this third UN Ocean Conference. So therefore, we should look at the outcome of such a conference, and this outcome should be so strong and should be so solid. It should be like COP21 climate agreement, or it should be so strong like UN Sustainable Development Goals of 2015. So such a strong and solid outcome is required to protect the oceans and also the marine environment. However, so the author has been clearly telling us that our collective aim must be clear. Our collective aim must be protecting the ocean through a tangible action from every participating country. And in fact, 10 years after the COP21, so it talks about the Paris Climate Deal. COP21 is about Paris Climate Deal. So the Paris Agreement that has established a binding global framework to limit the climate change, and this third UN Ocean Conference is also a historic opportunity to achieve such a solid and a strong outcome. And in fact, the Nice Ocean Agreements, remember I told you that this third ocean conference, UN Ocean Conference, is going to held at a place called Nice, and the Nice Ocean Agreements can actually form an international pact for the conservation and sustainable usage of ocean, fully in line with the SDGs of UN adopted in the year 2015. So we have 17 sustainable development goals, right? So we have as of now 17 sustainable development goals. And you could also go through the blue economy, how blue economy is very, very important. So from oceans we could harness the renewable energy, and oceans are the main shipping routes, and they are also the main routes of communication. And we have in the past understood that the ocean cables are also laid down beneath the sea as well, and they also provide us the fish or fishery resources, and fishery resources are also very important for the food security, nutrition security, livelihood security of our populations, and thereby improving the livelihoods and also the living standards of the coastal communities. And apart from that, the problem is plastic pollution is a problem. Unregulated illegal fishing is also another major problem that has been emanating, and increased oil spills is also another major problem. So all these problems have been threatening the importance of the blue economy or the potential of the overall blue economy. Now, the high seas, which actually represent around a 60% of the ocean, right? So high seas are even known as the global commons, because high seas would not come under the jurisdiction of any country. High seas actually represent more than 60% of the ocean, right? So they represent more than 60% of the ocean, and they are currently only areas which are not governed by the international law. So these high seas which are not governed by any international law, so we don't have any proper governance framework. We don't have the governance framework that is required to govern the high seas, and high seas are also known as the global commons. So what are global commons? So global commons are the areas on this planet which belong to every one of us, which are not the sole property of any country or any community. And in fact, another major problem when it comes to the governance of the global high seas is there is a lack of surveillance, and there is also a lack of rules for the governance of the high seas, and thereby it has been causing both social as well as the environmental disasters, social as well as environmental disasters in these high seas, right? So social and environmental disasters because of the multiple factors. So massive hydrocarbon exploration from these areas, plastic pollution, we discussed about this. This is also another major problem in high seas, and unregulated illegal fishing activities, unregulated and illegal fishing activities, and even the illegal capture of the protected animals from the high seas. So all these are the major threats or the major problems that the high seas have been facing. However, it is important through this third UN Ocean Conference, we must end the challenges. We must eliminate the challenges that the global high seas have been facing, and we must end the legal vacuum which is existing. So therefore we need the biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction agreement. So this BBNJ is biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions agreement. So this agreement must be ratified by the 60 countries so that it may come into force, and countries would also act on these different challenges collectively and individually as well, and we will end the legal vacuum as well once this agreement coming into the force. However, protection of the ocean, protection of the marine resources also requires a large scale public participation, large scale public awareness, knowledge dissemination, communication, along with the private financing. Financing is absent, governance frameworks are absent, there is a lack of large scale public involvement, public participation, public awareness when it comes to the protection of ocean resources is also absent. So therefore these are the components that we could further emphasize on. However, to continue enjoying the incredible economic opportunities that are provided by the ocean resources or provided by the oceans, we need to make sure the marine resources can actually regenerate. For that, so we need a solid outcome from the third UN Ocean Conference, and it is also very important that countries must adopt the biodiversity in areas beyond the national jurisdiction agreement as well. So that will lay a strong legal groundwork for the protection of the ocean resources. And the next important topic is RNA silencing technology, and this RNA silencing technology is also a very important for your prelims and mains examinations. Particularly for prelims examination, this is very important. So recently, researchers at Martin Luther University, so they have developed a highly effective RNA based antiviral agent, right? So they have recently developed an RNA based antiviral agent, and this antiviral agent could be used against the cucumber mosaic virus. So thereby the cucumber species, banana species, and various other plant species in India are being infected by the cucumber mosaic virus. Thereby it has been resulting in a large scale losses for the horticulture farmers. However, this RNA-based antiviral agent against the cucumber mosaic virus would offer a strong defense for the crops as well. Thereby, it is also significant for the Indian farmers, Indian agriculture sector, and it is also very important to substantially increase the horticulture protection by protecting crops, horticulture production by protecting crops from the cucumber mosaic virus. So in this table, the differences between DNA and RNA have been given. So DNA, it is a double stranded with exception of some viruses. So in some viruses there may be a single stranded DNA also present. So we could not say that in every organism DNA is having the double stranded. DNA is a double stranded. There may be exceptions that in some virus species there may be a single stranded DNA also. So RNA is generally a single stranded genetic material. And when we talk about the DNA, so it is a genetic material in almost all living organisms. However, RNA is a genetic material in some viruses only. So only some viruses may have RNA as their genetic material, but DNA, it is a genetic material in all living organisms. And in DNA, a sugar is deoxyribose, and RNA, the sugar is ribose. So it is known as deoxyribose nucleic acid and it is known as ribose nucleic acid. And in fact, the nitrogenous base pairs which are present in DNA are adenine, guanine, thymine and cytosine. So these are the nitrogenous base pairs which are present in the double stranded DNA structure. However, in RNA, the nitrogenous base pairs are adenine, guanine, cytosine and uracil, right? So here one thing that you should understand, the thymine will be replaced by uracil in RNA. So that is the nitrogenous base pairs in RNA. And now, what is this cucumber mosaic virus? Right, so it is important for us to understand the cucumber mosaic virus. So the cucumber mosaic virus is a widespread and also a devastating plant virus. And this cucumber mosaic virus is affecting over 1200 plant species, including food plant species, medicinal plant species. So you can imagine how destructive the cucumber mosaic virus is actually. And the cucumber mosaic virus is caused by a sap sucking aphid, right? So it is being transmitted by a sap sucking aphids, and nearly 90 different species of aphids can spread this cucumber mosaic virus. However, what will be the impact of the cucumber mosaic virus on the plants? So it actually causes the mosaic decoloration on the plants, and it will also result in the stunted growth of the plants which are affected with the cucumber mosaic virus, and malformed fruits, and even the severe yield losses also. The yield loss reported more than 70% of the yield loss because of the cucumber mosaic virus. So you can imagine the loss that the farmers would go through. So in India, the cucumber mosaic virus actually causes 25 to 30% banana crop loss, right? So therefore, in terms of horticulture losses, cucumber mosaic virus is contributing to the major horticulture losses in Indian agriculture. Now on this image, it is given that there are different pathogens, and pathogens causes various diseases among human beings. Now it is not related with this, but it is important for your examination, so kindly go through this. Right, so what are the viruses, what are the bacteria, what are fungi, what are protozoa, and what are the diseases that they actually cause? So kindly pause this video and also go through all these different diseases and the pathogens which actually cause those diseases. There may be a question in your prelims examination on this. And now, how RNA silencing technology will help control the cucumber mosaic virus? Because the RNA silencing technology is a new intervention that will help us curb or prevent the cucumber mosaic virus. So RNA silencing is actually a natural immune mechanism that is present in plants, right? So this is a natural immune mechanism which is present in plants with a double-stranded RNA, right? So in fact, a double-stranded RNA can actually trigger the production of a small interference RNA, right? So it will actually produce the small interference RNA. So this small interference RNA then further degrade the viral RNA which is present in the plant, and ultimately it will stop the infection. Right? So ultimately, when we talk about the RNA silencing technology, this RNA silencing technology is a natural immune mechanism which is already present in the plant species. And in this RNA silencing mechanism, what happens is that there is a double-stranded RNA, and this double-stranded RNA triggers the production of a small interfering RNA. And this small interfering RNA will degrade the viral RNA within the plant, and it will stop the infection. Right? So how it will work? So when virus actually infect a plant species, it releases a double-stranded RNA, right? So for example, imagine that a virus is infecting the cucumber plant species. So it releases a double-stranded RNA, and plant detects this danger as a signal, right? So because a virus is a pathogen and that has entered into the plant, and that will affect the health of the plant as well. So because of that reason, plant detects this as a danger signal, and special enzymes called dicer-like enzymes then cut the dsRNA, because the double-stranded RNA. So double-stranded RNA into small pieces, and they are called as a small interfering RNA. And this small interfering RNA will help the plant identify and also destroy the virus RNA, right? So this is how the RNA silencing technology will work, and it is also having or giving us the promising results when it comes to dealing with the cucumber mosaic virus. And the next important topic is Raja Ravi Verma, and he is also known as the father of modern Indian art. So he is very important and very significant for your prelims examination, right? So why it is in news? It is given in the Hindu newspaper on the occasion of 177th birth anniversary. Raja Ravi Verma in Kilimanur Palace. So Kilimanur Palace is located in Kerala. So Kilimanur Palace is also the birthplace of Raja Ravi Verma. And in fact, this Kilimanur Palace will release a musical album called Pranamam. And this musical album Pranamam will be considered as a tribute to the Raja Ravi Verma, right? And if we talk about Raja Ravi Verma, who is he and why he is in news and why he is so popular? So Kilimanur in Kerala is the place where Raja Ravi Verma was born in 1848. And in fact, Raja Ravi Verma is also known as one of the most prominent and leading figures in the history of modern India. So history of modern India, particularly the history of modern Indian art. Why? Because Raja Ravi Verma is rightly called as the father of modern Indian art, right? So he is called as the father of modern Indian art, and you should remember this because this is very important, and there is also a possibility of such things being asked in the examination. And in fact, if we talk about the Raja Ravi Verma's art, particularly the painting, his depictions of Hindu gods, Hindu goddesses, so they went on to influence their portrayal in art and even cinema for several years. And in fact, he started a lithographic printing press in the year 1894, which was eventually sold to a printing technician from Germany. And in fact, the oleographs, so oleographs are a kind of an oil paintings, right? So a kind of a oil paintings. So these oleographs which are being produced by the press, so they actually depict the gods, goddesses scenes from the Mahabharata, Ramayana and the Puranas. And in fact, Raja Ravi Varma was closely related to the royal family of Travancore of present day Kerala state of India, right? So these are important details with respect to the Raja Ravi Varma, right? So the next important topic is Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center. So we'll understand what exactly is Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center and what are the relation between Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center as well as the Enforcement Directorate. So recently, Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center has been authorized to share the information with the Enforcement Directorate under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act of 2002, right? So Enforcement Directorate has been established under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act to investigate the cases which involve the money laundering. However, the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center has been established to prevent the cybercrime. However, now under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, the Enforcement Directorate can also investigate the cases related to the cyber crime. So they can also investigate the matters related to the cyber crime, and thereby it is said that the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center will provide all necessary and relevant information to the Enforcement Directorate to investigate the cases of the cyber crime. And this initiative actually aims at combating the rising cyber frauds in India, because we have seen a number of cyber frauds which are emerging in India, and people are losing hundreds of crores, so which increasingly targeting the general public. And so if we talk about specifically the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, so it operates under the Ministry of Home Affairs, right? So it is under the administrative jurisdiction of Ministry of Home Affairs, and it serves as a central hub for addressing the cybercrime that has been taking place in India, and it also aims to further strengthen country's response to the cyber threat that the country has been facing. And it also focuses on further enhancing the public awareness, improving the capacity of the law enforcement agencies all across India. So here it is very important that the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center is under the Ministry of Home Affairs. You have to remember this, right? So this information sharing mechanism under the Enforcement Directorate to Enforcement Directorate about any cybercrime by the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center. So the Revenue Department, which is under the Ministry of Finance, brought the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center under Section 66 of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, right? So if Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center is brought under Section 66 of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, then the I4C must provide information to the Enforcement Directorate, and that will help investigate the matters which are involving the cybercrime. And this move will enable the I4C to exchange information with the ED and other law enforcement agencies, thereby helping to trace and even identify the masterminds who are behind the cyber frauds. And this partnership is vital and important for tracking the money trails which are linked to the cyber fraud and the cyber crime. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like our class, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.